You're standing at the pump, watching the numbers climb, and you already know, before it clicks off, that this fill-up is going to break $40 more than it did 6 weeks ago. You can feel it in your chest, that specific irritation that isn't quite anger yet, more like the feeling of being pickpocketed in slow motion by someone you can't see. And you're not wrong about that feeling. But here's what nobody is explaining to you. The gas pump is not the story. The gas pump is the first sentence of a story that takes 6 months to finish, and the most expensive chapters haven't been written yet. By the time we're done here, you will understand week by week exactly how a barrel of crude oil becomes a more expensive gallon of milk on your shelf. The specific timeline, the specific lag, the specific categories that get hit first and last. And you will understand why your grocery bill is going to keep climbing for months after gas prices stabilize. Because that's what the data shows, every single time. Let me walk you through the chain. Stage 1 happens before you even notice. Crude oil trades on futures markets. When traders get word of a major supply disruption, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter why, futures prices move within hours. Not days, hours. During the energy shock of early 2022, Brent crude went from roughly $90 a barrel to over $127 in 13 days. A 41% increase in less than 2 weeks. And that movement isn't physical oil disappearing from a warehouse. It's the market pricing in expected scarcity. Financial instruments moving at the speed of fear. Now here's where it touches you. Stage 2, the gas pump. EIA data consistently shows that retail gasoline prices respond to crude oil increases within 1 to 2 weeks. Researchers call this the rockets and feathers phenomenon. Prices rocket up fast, then float down slowly. Severin Borenstein at UC Berkeley documented this asymmetry decades ago, and it has held true through every oil event since. The composition of what you pay at the pump breaks down roughly like this. Crude oil accounts for 54 to 59%, refining costs 12 to 18%, distribution and marketing 8 to 12%, and federal plus state taxes the remaining 13 to 20%. So when crude rises $30 a barrel, that's about 71 cents per gallon at the crude input level. Your pump price historically climbs 60 cents to $1 per gallon, depending on refining capacity and where you live. You feel that one immediately, within a week or two. That's the punch you notice. But here's the part that doesn't make the news. Stage 3, diesel. Diesel fuel powers the trucks that move 72.6% of all U.S. freight tonnage, according to the American Trucking Associations. When diesel spikes, the trucking industry passes fuel surcharges to shippers on a weekly or bi-weekly basis through standard surcharge tables. This is automatic. Nobody debates it, nobody absorbs it. It flows downhill, and diesel follows crude on a 7 to 21 day lag, slightly slower than gasoline because of contract structures and heating oil demand sharing the same refining pathway. So now, 3 weeks after the initial disruption, every product that moves by truck in this country just got more expensive to move. Every single one. Stage 4. And this is where it gets invisible to you. International container shipping. If the disruption involves a maritime choke point, shipping rates don't just rise because of fuel costs. They rise because of route changes. When the Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping forced major container lines to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope in late 2023 and into 2024, transit times increased by 10 to 14 days per voyage. That's 10 to 14 days of additional fuel burn, additional crew costs, additional capital tied up on the water instead of loading at port. Container spot rates from Asia to Europe roughly doubled within 2 months. The Strait of Hormuz, specifically, approximately 21 million barrels per day of petroleum liquids transited that waterway as of 2022. That's roughly 21% of global consumption passing through a channel you could almost see across on a clear day. Alternative pipeline routes have limited spare capacity, estimated at around 6.5 million barrels per day combined. Do that math. If a significant portion of 21 million barrels per day needs to find another path, there isn't one that handles the volume. 14 to 45 days after the initial disruption, shipping costs have repriced. Everything that touches a container ship. And if you think that's not your groceries, check where your coffee, your olive oil, your seafood, your out-of-season produce, and your spices come from. Everything that touches a container ship just got more expensive to deliver. And you haven't seen a single cent of that at the grocery store yet. That's the timeline the news doesn't give you. They show you the gas price graphic with the big red arrow. They don't show you the wave still traveling. Stage 5 happens between day 30 and day 90. This is when manufacturers feel it. Food processors, consumer goods companies, the people who turn raw ingredients into the packages on your shelf. They operate on 30, 60, 90-day supply contracts. A food processor with 45 days of ingredient inventory on hand doesn't feel the price increase for 45 days. Large companies hedge commodity inputs using futures contracts. That delays the hit further. But hedges expire. Contracts renew, and when they do, the new price is the new price. Let me put a household around this. Let's call them the Nguyens. Combined income of $92,000, which is close to the national median for a dual-income household. 2 teenagers, a 10-year-old Honda and a 6-year-old pickup. Mortgage payment of $1,800. They spend roughly $780 a month on groceries and about $400 on gas between 2 vehicles. Week 1 of the disruption. Gas goes from $3.40 a gallon to $4.15. Their monthly fuel cost jumps from $400 to roughly $490. $90. Noticeable, irritating, manageable. Week 4, diesel surcharges have repriced. Their Amazon deliveries, their bulk purchases from Costco, the shipments to their local grocery store, all carrying higher freight costs now baked into the logistics chain. They don't see this yet. It hasn't hit the shelf tag. Week 8. The grocery store starts adjusting. Fresh produce first. High perishability means air freight or refrigerated trucking, no inventory buffer, shortest contract cycles. Eggs and dairy next. Cold chain dependent, short shelf life. The Nguyens' grocery bill creeps from $780 to $820. They notice, they adjust, buy less organic, switch a few brands. They tell themselves it's temporary. Week 12 through 20. Canned goods, frozen foods, bread, packaged products, all catching up now as manufacturer contracts renew and the new input costs flow through. Their grocery bill is now $860 and climbing. Meanwhile, gas may have started to stabilize or even drift down slightly. The news has moved on to something else. But here's what makes this genuinely maddening. The BLS data from the 2022 episode is unambiguous on this point. Energy CPI peaked in June 2022 at 41.6% year over year. Food at home CPI peaked in August 2022 at 13.5%, the highest since 1979. Energy peaked first. Food peaked 2 months later. But here's the kicker. By mid-2023, energy CPI had gone negative. Negative 16.7% year over year. Gas was cheaper than the year before. And food at home, still up 3.4%. Food prices went up by elevator and never took the elevator back down. That number deserves a pause. Prices went up with oil. Prices did not come back down with oil. This is the asymmetry that costs you real money, and it happens every single time. After the 2008 oil spike, same pattern. After the 1990 Gulf War spike, same pattern. Food prices ratchet up and then just stay. Economists attribute this to wage costs that rose during the spike, workers got raises that don't reverse, to commercial rents that increased, and, frankly, to the fact that once consumers have adjusted to a higher price, retailers face no competitive pressure to reduce it. The new price becomes the new floor. Now let me tell you about the channel nobody talks about. You think the oil in your food is in the gas tank of the truck that delivered it. That's part of it. Transportation accounts for approximately 3.3 cents of every food dollar, according to USDA Economic Research Service data. Sounds small, but it compounds through every stage of a supply chain that has 6 or 7 stages. But the bigger channel is fertilizer. Natural gas is the primary feedstock for nitrogen fertilizer through the Haber-Bosch process. An oil and gas price spike directly increases fertilizer costs, which flow into grain prices, which flow into everything made from grain, which flow into animal feed, which flow into meat and dairy prices. And this channel's timeline is not weeks. It's a growing season. 6 to 18 months. A spring disruption affects the fertilizer applied to this year's crops, which affects the harvest cost in fall, which reaches grocery shelves the following winter. The oil in your food isn't just fuel, it's fertilizer. It's the plastic packaging, polyethylene, and peat are petroleum derivatives. It's the pesticides and herbicides, which are petrochemical products. Even goods with short, local supply chains are affected when you extend the timeline far enough. This is why your grocery bill seems to have a mind of its own, because it does. It's responding to an oil shock that happened months ago, through channels you can't see, on a timeline that has nothing to do with today's gas price. And here's where the structural piece matters. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the government's primary tool for moderating these spikes, stood at approximately 391 million barrels as of late 2024. That's the lowest level since 1983, following the historically large release of roughly 180 million barrels in 2022. The buffer for future disruptions is significantly reduced. And global refining capacity? Approximately 3.3 million barrels per day of capacity closed between 2020 and 2023, according to IEA data. Meaning, the system that converts crude oil into the gasoline and diesel you actually use has less slack than it did a decade ago. Less buffer in reserves, less flexibility in refining. Faster, larger pass-through from disruption to pump. If you're thinking, okay, so what do I actually do with this? I want to be honest about what the research supports and what it doesn't. The data tells us which categories move fastest and which move slowest. Fresh produce, dairy, eggs, fresh meat, beverages, imported goods of any kind. These are the most oil-sensitive categories. They move first because they have the shortest shelf life, the most transportation-intensive supply chains, the least inventory buffering. Dry goods, rice, pasta, beans, canned goods with long shelf life. These absorb shocks more slowly because they can be warehoused. Products with high value relative to their weight, like spices and condiments, are least affected because shipping is a tiny fraction of their retail price. Understanding which categories are early movers versus late movers doesn't prevent the increase. But it tells you what's happening when your grocery bill changes, and it tells you the pattern isn't random. It's a wave moving through a system, and the wave has a shape you can recognize. What the data does not support is panic buying. The research is clear on this. Household stockpiling during supply disruptions increases demand precisely when supply chains are stressed, accelerating the very price increases people are trying to avoid. Federal Reserve research on inflation expectations shows that consumer panic behavior can contribute to price spirals. The system punishes the rational individual response when everyone does it simultaneously. If you're watching this and you noticed your grocery bill broke a mental ceiling recently, and you checked gas prices and they'd already started to come down, and you couldn't figure out why food was still climbing, now you know. You're not imagining it. You're living inside a lag structure that has repeated identically through every oil disruption since 1973. Energy peaks first, food peaks months later, and food never fully comes back down. Comment if you've noticed this pattern. The grocery bill climbing even after gas stabilized. Because once you see the lag, you can't unsee it. Here's what I want you to carry out of this. There's a debate among credentialed economists right now about how much of the food price increase during energy shocks is genuine cost, pass-through, versus companies using disruption as cover to expand margins. Isabella Weber at UMass Amherst has published research arguing that cost shocks create opportunities for coordinated price increases that exceed what input costs justify. The European Central Bank published findings in 2023 suggesting corporate profits contributed significantly to inflation. Other economists point to genuine input cost increases, energy, labor, supply chain, as the primary driver. Both things can be true simultaneously. The input costs genuinely rise, and some portion of the final shelf price increase is margin expansion that won't reverse. Either way, you pay it. Either way, the price doesn't come back down. That's not conspiracy. That's what the BLS data series says happened every single time. You can't budget your way out of a structural pass-through. What you can do is understand the timeline. The gas pump is the warning. The grocery shelf is the aftershock. And the aftershock always lasts longer than the initial earthquake. Fresh and perishable goods move first. Packaged goods follow. And the longest wave of all, through fertilizer, through the growing season, through next year's harvest, that one's still traveling underground right now. And most people won't connect it to the oil disruption that caused it. The BLS Consumer Expenditure Survey tells us that households headed by someone 45 to 54 spent an average of $9,343 on food at home and about $4,800 on gasoline annually as of 2022 data. A 15 to 20% increase in both categories, consistent with a major oil shock, represents roughly $2,100 to $2,800 in additional annual spending. That's not a rounding error. That's a vacation that disappears. That's a retirement contribution that doesn't happen. And nobody sat you down and explained the timeline. They just showed you the gas price graphic and moved on. The wave that starts at a choke point moves at different speeds through different channels. Gasoline, 1 to 2 weeks. Diesel surcharges, 2 to 3 weeks. Container shipping, a month or more. Grocery shelves, 3 to 6 months. Fertilizer flowing into next year's crops, 12 to 18 months. And every historical episode since the 1973 embargo tells us the same ending. Those food prices don't fully come back down. They find a new floor, and your budget adjusts, and nobody explains why. Now you know why. The next time your grocery bill feels wrong, feels heavier than it should, feels disconnected from today's headlines, check what oil did 4 months ago. That's where the answer lives, not in today's news cycle, in the lag. Subscribe if you want the math done honestly. I won't sell you anything.